The mahogany door of Alexander. Chen's corner office had witnessed countless power plays, million-dollar deals, and the tears of executives who couldn't meet their targets. But it had never opened to reveal what stood before him that gray. Tuesday morning, a little girl, no more than 7 years old, clutching a worn manila envelope against her chest like it contained the secrets of the universe. Alexander looked up from his laptop, his reading glasses sliding down his nose as he processed the impossible scene. The child wore a faded purple dress that had seen better days, her dark hair pulled into 2 uneven pigtails, and her sneakers, one blue, one pink, squeaked softly against his imported Italian marble floor. Behind her, his assistant Margaret stood frozen in the doorway, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, clearly having failed in her gatekeeper duties. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Chen," Margaret stammered, rushing forward. "She just walked past security and Mom's sick, so I came instead," the little girl announced, her voice trembling but determined. She held out the envelope with both hands, the way one might present a sacred offering. "She told me you're the only one who can help." Alexander removed his glasses slowly, buying himself a moment to think. In his 15 years as CEO of Chen Industries, he'd seen every trick in the book: corporate espionage disguised as janitors, reporters posing as delivery people, even a desperate competitor who'd tried to scale the building's exterior. But a child? This was new territory. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked, his tone softer than the one he'd used moments earlier to fire his VP of operations. Emma Rodriguez." She took 3 careful steps forward, leaving small, wet footprints on his floor. It must have started raining. "My mom cleans offices. Building C, 4th floor. She's been cleaning them for 5 years. Ever since my dad—" Her voice trailed off, and she bit her lower lip. Alexander felt something twist in his chest. He gestured for Margaret to leave them alone, ignoring her scandalized expression. Once the door clicked shut, he rolled his chair from behind his imposing desk and positioned himself closer to the child's level. "Tell me about your mom, Emma." The words tumbled out like water from a broken dam. Her mother, Maria Rodriguez, had been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer 2 months ago. The medical bills were drowning them. Maria had applied for the company's hardship fund, a program Alexander himself had established years ago, but her application had been denied due to a technicality. She wasn't a direct employee, but rather contracted through a third-party cleaning service. "Mom didn't want to bother you," Emma continued, her eyes welling with tears she was fighting desperately to contain. "She said important people like you don't have time for people like us. But Mr. Chen, she's getting worse. The doctors say she needs treatment now, not later. I heard her crying last night, and I had to try." She thrust the envelope toward him again. Inside, Alexander found medical records, bills with alarming totals highlighted in yellow, and a worn photograph of Emma and her mother at what looked like a school carnival, both beaming at the camera with matching smiles. Alexander studied the photo for a long moment, and suddenly he was 8 years old again, watching his own mother work 3 jobs to keep food on their table after his father abandoned them. He remembered her hands, perpetually red and raw from cleaning other people's homes, remembered the way she'd smile through her exhaustion when she helped him with homework at midnight, his success this corner office, the expensive suit he wore, all of it traced back to her sacrifices. "Emma, how did you get here?" "To my office, I mean. That's 43 floors up." "I took the elevator," she said matter-of-factly. "The security man was helping an old lady with her wheelchair, so I just walked past. Then I asked people which floor you were on. Most people ignored me. But a nice lady on the 39th floor told me to take the elevator all the way up. She said she hoped I'd give that heartless CEO a piece of my mind." Emma's cheeks flushed. "But you don't seem heartless to me." Alexander couldn't help the small smile that tugged at his lips. He stood, walked to his window, and looked out at the city sprawling below. From this height, the people looked like ants, scurrying about their lives. It was easy to forget they were human, each carrying their own burdens, their own stories. "Emma, wait here for just a moment. Can you do that for me?" She nodded, and he stepped out to find Margaret. "Get me David from HR immediately, and Rachel from legal. Also, find out which contracting company we use for cleaning services." His voice carried the sharp edge his employees knew meant business was about to happen, fast. Within 10 minutes, his office had transformed into a command center. David, a nervous man in his 50s, stood shuffling papers while Rachel, sharp-eyed and efficient, tapped notes into her tablet. Emma sat in one of the leather chairs, looking impossibly small, her legs dangling well above the floor. "Explain to me," Alexander began, his voice dangerously quiet, "how a hardship fund application from an employee, because let's be clear, anyone who works in this building is an employee of this company, contracted or not, gets denied while someone is fighting cancer." David's face went pale. "Sir, the fund guidelines specifically state direct employees only. It was established to prevent—" "I don't care what it was established to prevent," Alexander interrupted, his tone cold enough to freeze water. "What I care about is that a woman who has cleaned our floors, our bathrooms, our conference rooms for 5 years, a woman who has made this building run smoothly, is being told she doesn't matter because of bureaucratic semantics." He turned to Rachel. "I want those guidelines rewritten by end of day. Anyone who works in this building, contracted or otherwise, is eligible for the hardship fund." "Is that clear?" "Crystal clear, Mr. Chen. David, I want Maria Rodriguez's medical bills on my desk within the hour. All of them. And get me the contact information for her oncologist. Sir, the total is substantial." "Did I ask you about the total?" "Get me the bills." As his team scrambled to execute his orders, Alexander returned to Emma, who had been watching the exchange with wide eyes. "Emma, I'm going to make sure your mom gets the treatment she needs. But I need you to promise me something." "Anything," she whispered. "Next time you need to see me, use the phone." He pulled out his business card and wrote his personal cell number on the back. "This is my direct line. If you or your mother ever need anything, you call this number." "No more sneaking past security, deal?" Emma nodded vigorously, clutching the card like it was made of gold. "Now let's call your mom and let her know you're safe." "I imagine she's worried sick." The phone call revealed that Maria had indeed discovered Emma missing and was in a panic. Alexander personally drove Emma home to their modest apartment in Queens, his driver navigating the unfamiliar streets, while he sat in the back with the little girl who had somehow cracked open his carefully constructed armor. Maria Rodriguez met them at the door, tears streaming down her face as she pulled Emma into her arms. She was thin, wearing a headscarf, but her eyes held a fierce strength that reminded Alexander of his own mother. "I'm so sorry," Maria kept repeating. "Mr. Chen, I never meant for her to bother you. I didn't even know she knew where—" "She didn't bother me," Alexander interrupted gently. "She reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Something important." 3 months later, Maria's cancer was in remission. Alexander had personally overseen her treatment, connecting her with the best specialists in the city. But more than that, he'd overhauled Chen Industries from the ground up. The hardship fund had been expanded and renamed the Emma Rodriguez Initiative. Every contracted worker received full benefits. Wages were increased across the board for support staff. His board of directors had balked at the costs, but Alexander had been unmovable. "A company that doesn't care for its people isn't a company worth running," he'd told them. "If you can't see that, there's the door." On Emma's 8th birthday, Alexander attended her party, a small gathering in a community center with homemade decorations and a cake from a local bakery. He was the only one wearing a suit, and he'd never felt more out of place or more welcomed. Emma introduced him to her friends as Mr. Chen, the man who saved my mom, and he had to excuse himself for a moment to collect his emotions. Maria pulled him aside later, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You gave us our life back. How do I ever thank you for that?" Alexander thought of his own mother, gone now for 5 years, and how proud she would have been to see the man he'd become. Not because of his money or his title, but because he'd remembered where he came from. "You already have," he said simply. "You raised a daughter brave enough to walk into a CEO's office and demand justice. That's everything." As he left the party that evening, his phone buzzed with an email. Another hardship fund application, this time from a warehouse worker in New Jersey whose son needed surgery. Alexander smiled and made a call. There was work to be done, and for the first time in years, it felt like the work that mattered most. Sometimes it takes a child's courage to remind us of our own humanity. to show us that the distance between the 43rd floor and the ground isn't measured in elevation but in empathy. And sometimes, if we're lucky, we get the chance to close that distance, one small act of kindness at a time.